Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday D-Day anniversary to you. We're definitely going to celebrate the June 6, 1944 anniversary of the invasion of Europe. It was a big day for our world, and it kind of ties in a little bit to the theme of unity that we're talking about here. Last week we talked about why we have unity, and of course we're going to be in Ephesians chapter 4 again today. But today we want to talk a little bit more about how we obtain that unity and the results of that unity. The Bible tells us about it. I did want to mention one thing, and that is unity has to be a voluntary act. It has to be something that everyone wants to do. If we force unity, and that's, in our country, in our churches, in our families, in our workplace, if we force unity, that's not unity, that's tyranny. Unity has to be something that we all want. And I liken it to, I got a baseball field here behind me, and I liken it to all the players on a team. They're all working towards that same goal, that victory. They want that victory. And they're going to accomplish that victory by working together as a team. Church is no different. Your family's no different. So let's talk today a little bit more about this awesome subject of unity, and I really feel like it's something we need to talk about in today's climate for sure. Good to see you. Ephesians chapter number 4. Let's go ahead and begin. So in Ephesians 4, look with me at verse number 8. Verse number 11. Initially, we talked about the how. How do we have unity? How do we have it in our church? Well, God says that we have unity through the church and through the various gifts that God has blessed us with. And when we were talking last week, we left off with the psalm that Paul was quoting, talking about God being this victorious king who had spoiled the enemy and was now distributing the spoils to his people, the spoils of war. And if you look down at verse 11, he continues on and says that not only do we accomplish this unity through the various gifts that God has given us, but we also do it through the leadership that he has given us. And in verse 11 it says, "And he gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers." After stressing that, Christ has given us these wonderful gifts that we need to use to support the church, he continues on and says, by the way, you not only are you gifted with the spiritual gifts that you've been given, but you've been gifted with the spiritual leadership that has been given to you as well. We don't need to go into the definitions. I would encourage you to kind of research those on your own. Obviously, what's an apostle? Apostle is someone who has personally witnessed the life and times of Jesus Christ and was taught directly by him and was able to therefore go out and be a witness and say, hey, I saw Christ. I know what he said. He taught me, and now I'm teaching you. So there's some other good definitions. I encourage you to read them on your own time. But let's look at the point number 3 now, the last part, verse 12. "For the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ." So this is the result of unity. Point number 3 would be the results of unity. Okay, so we want to mature ourselves and mature others so that we can serve. We can continue to realize the vision, the purpose of the church itself. And the opening word of this verse indicates the purpose or the result. What's the result? It's the perfecting of the saints. That's why we have unity. Common sense to me. I mean, if we, I don't know if you've noticed this, but when a church loses its unity, when it begins to fight, when it begins to have inner conflict, what's the first thing that you see happen? The ministries fail. The church no longer is outward focused. It becomes inward focused. It becomes I-centric instead of Christ-centric. It becomes, meeting the needs of the squeaky wheel, so to speak, instead of meeting the needs of the lost world and meeting the needs of the saints in the church. Let's look at verse 13. It says, "Till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ." Now, it's really important for us to understand here something that I think Paul's trying to teach us, and that is this. There's no such thing as a perfect Christian. There's no such thing as a perfect person. One of the common temptations that we face when talking about these kind of verses about, perfecting the saints and, edifying the church, is we think that it's entirely possible to achieve this level of status where, we are now perfect creatures and we can do no wrong, and we lose humility and instead just build up our pride. And we have to be careful with that. That's not what's being said here. He says, till we all come in the unity of faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. The mature believer and a church that has a complete party of mature believers is going to be characterized by unity. You're going to see them because they're all working together. There is not one who thinks he's more highly Christ-like than others. Matter of fact, the one who's probably the most Christ-like is going to be the one who's the most humble, the one who is the most willing servant in your church, so to speak. And here's the thing: Paul is not suggesting that it comes at the expense of truth, but that there is a commitment to the truth, and that commitment to the truth will lead to unity. The problem with pride is we lie to ourselves. We convince ourselves that we are good enough, that we're sufficient, that we don't need God's help, that we've arrived. And Paul's trying to warn us here. He says, listen, our job is to chase after the truth, which is, I am still a sinner saved by grace. And unfortunately, there's too many people who believe that they have arrived when they truly haven't. They're just as prideful as can be. So the last thing, and I'm done here, but the point of the church is to become so grounded that we can stand. Look at verse 14. That we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness whereby they lie in wait to deceive. Really pay attention to this. Don't be childlike in the sense that you're bouncing to and fro, that you're tossed to and fro, and carried about with every new thing that you hear, or every new thing that you read, or every new thing that you watch from some fancy newfangled guy who comes along and says, hey, what do you think about this? He says, listen, know what you believe, and believe what you know, and follow after that truth, and don't stop serving when you get carried about by some crazy new idea that the devil might be trying to convince you exists. So my point being is this: the perfecting the saints is not a pursuit of perfection. It's a pursuit of truth and humility and a unity. Okay, we as a church should be working together to accomplish God's goal, not our goal.